the Pit Stop Ranch. Since there's only so many ways you can present on a video, puttying and sanding and, well, just the tedium that is body work, I figured I would go ahead and update you on our most recent distraction, Pale Horse. Jimmy is a few minor touches, masking and degreasing and final items away from getting primer, sealing primer on the cabin doors. Very, very close. Unfortunately, wind blows. So we are forced to wait for what passes as inclement weather around here before we can do any more patio painting. So a few videos back, I introduced you to our latest rescue, the Pale Horse, our 1989 Ford Mustang LX. And since then, the siren's call of a new project has been pulling us away from making as much progress on the bodywork on Jimmy as we might have been able to, or even getting the safety equipment installed and slow the race truck. But that's how it is. We've all been there. We're no better than anyone else. In fact, we might be worse than most. We like to say around here, making progress on a project car, any project car, is better than not working on any project at all. As you can tell, it runs. We got it started.
Right up and throttle.
All right, go ahead and close it.
Close throttle.
All right, fire.
Firing up.
As you can see, we got it to fire on some starter fluid, which is an indication that the ignition system is fine. This is the longest the Mustang has run since we've had it. Up until this instance, this very instance, it would run for about 5 minutes and then just shut down and then not want to restart again. I actually do not believe it has a thermostat in it because it's sitting right about 150. Old Pale Horse here has actually failed to fail on me. It's got a definite miss. It idles rough, but it continues to idle, in spite of what I was expecting it to do. Because you see, up till now, we were able to get it started with the turn of the key, and it would run about like this. You could rev it, seems good, and then about 5 minutes in, bleh, and then it wouldn't want to restart. A couple reasons why we figured what was going on with that. But first, let's go ahead and go through the sordid tale of how we got to a car that has failed to disappoint us. So a little recap so far for those of you who haven't been introduced to it, or maybe you don't mind a moment to go ahead and recap the history of this fine automobile. It belonged to a retired teacher. If I were to guess, I'd say a retired shop teacher, because, you know, the legend is more interesting than the actual truth. This retired shop teacher was spending his golden years living in an apartment complex not far from here. And in 2007, this fine automobile failed smog. It is clear that at that time, some effort was put into updating and fixing it, trying to get it to pass California emissions laws, but did not succeed. And at that point, it was put on planned non-operation, and then gradually abandoned and forgotten about. Late last year, late 2001, unfortunately, the shop teacher caught the Rona and passed from it. Rest in peace. And the apartment management wanted, well, they needed to get it out of there. And so it was towed. That's when it ended up on the Pit Stop Ranch's radar. That's when we decided it needed rescuing and brought to a new home. Now, since it'd been sitting for as long as it has been sitting, we knew that the fuel system was probably going to be pretty gummed up. Now, in a carbureted car, that's an issue, but it's not one that's massively difficult to overcome. On fuel injection, that can be a much bigger problem, and that was something we were a bit apprehensive on it. And of course, the fuel system did not disappoint. Since we know it had been sitting so long, we knew that the fuel system would be bad, especially the gas tank. And boy, was it bad. Real bad. I'm sorry, the thought of it just, tasty. That came out of the gas tank. Unfortunately, the trials and tribulations of the great Mustang gas tank saga is not immortalized in digital film. You'll just have to take my word for it. However, it was a mess. A vehicle that's been sitting for 15 years, it's kind of what you expect. You see, gasoline is a mixture of a lot of different hydrocarbons, all with approximately the same volatility. And what happens with time is obviously the lighter components start evaporating off. The chemical reactions, you could almost call it a very slow combustion process occurs, and oxygen that's available will react with the hydrocarbons, and they'll become shorter chain or different forms, and those forms that are volatile will evaporate away as well, and most of it just evaporates away. And then what happens is the longer chain ones or other compounds are formed and break down eventually till a significant part of the original fuel is water and CO2, the products of combustion. And then the water then sits at the bottom of the tank since it's heavier than the hydrocarbons, and it starts attacking any bare metal. And that's how you end up with this mess. Part of the rustiness in there was there's a baffle inside the tank to help keep fuel slosh when driving spiritedly from pulling away from the fuel pump and the fuel pickup. But also the fuel pump itself has a fair amount of bare steel components, as well as much of the fuel level sending unit. Both of those items look like we fished them up off of the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. They were horrible. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure life evolved, or they've evolved to a higher plane, because they clearly grew legs and walked off because we can't find them. We know that we didn't throw them out. We just don't know under what workbench they crawled. What is left at the bottom of the tank is, when after this whole process occurs, is rust and varnish. And varnish is this sludgy concoction of just disgustingness, and it smells as good as it sounds as you listen to me describe it. That's probably what happened to the fuel pump and the fuel sending unit. They were banished somewhere where the odor wasn't going to get to us. Now, unlike other YouTubers who've been down this path and just go ahead and spend the $200 on a new gas tank, we thought we'd do the smart thing and clean this tank out and spend $200 on fuel filters that we'll have to replace every few weeks until what we missed has gone. Now, how we clean this out is, of course, we filled it up and soaked it. We initially soaked it in a concoction of gasoline, sea foam, octane booster, eye of newt, whatever we thought was going to be a effective way of breaking up and breaking down the solids and the varnish and so forth. And after letting that sit, we went ahead and dumped that out, disposing of it properly, of course. We then went ahead and refilled it with a muriatic acid and water solution. And we let that sit for a couple hours. And then we dumped that out, again, disposing of it properly. Then we broke out the Harbor Freight pressure washer and just pressure washed through every single opening, every single angle, every single way we could, and disposed of that properly. Now, looking through available openings, we determined that it was still full of crap. So again, we did the right thing, put a little bit of solvent in there, and we used a rag on a stick. The fuel filter situation or the fuel delivery situation doesn't necessarily explain why we're able to start it up and run it and be able to rev it, do all that stuff for a while, and then it starts running worse, and then it won't rev anymore. It just about loads up and starts backfiring. All of that is considerably more likely ignition system issue. Okay, it's starting to do what it normally does, which sputters and dies. And if I try and blip the throttle, you hear it actually backfiring. I hear it backfiring into the air cleaner. Now, we believe it's the TFI that's causing this problem. TFI is right here at the base of the distributor. Leave it to Ford to name ignition module TFI. And placing it where it's at, it's very susceptible to heat. And according to the internet, this is exactly the sort of behavior you get when the TFI starts to break down due to heat. Leave it to Ford to put a delicate ignition component right in a place where it's going to get cooked. I mean, the only thing sillier would be putting a delicate ignition component right behind the water pump, where if the water pump goes or a hose starts leaking, it gets soaked and shorts out. I'm looking at you, OptiSpark. I'm looking at you. And now, as you can see, headlights work. So do the side marker lights, as well as the rear blinkers and the passenger side front blinker. The driver's side front blinker doesn't seem to be working, but that's a minor issue. If you recall, the driver's side headlight was out of the car and it was just a mess of wires just puking out of the light bucket. A few videos back, we did a junkyard crawl. This junkyard crawl, we were looking for another Foxbody, approximately the same year cluster, 88, 89, 90. So we could go ahead and scavenge the front lighting wiring harness from it. We found it initially with an internet search, then we went to the junkyard, we found it, and it was picked pretty bare. Fortunately, the wiring harness we were looking for was there. However, it was damaged as well. Fortunately, that damaged wiring harness was damaged in a different area from the original wiring harness that came in the car. So we went ahead and from two messed up wiring harnesses, we built one good functioning wire harness. And now the first time that we legitimately got this started on its own tank, of course it was down not here. And to fulfill our hot rodder's creed, the first thing that we tried to do was a burnout. Unfortunately, the transmission would not go into gear. Now, of course, it goes into gear, shifts between gears just fine with the engine off. However, with the engine on, it will not go into gear, which of course is classic indication clutch isn't fully disengaging, which is just a matter of diving under the driver's side rail, a couple of wrenches, and adjusting the cable, the clutch cable. Shouldn't be but 5 minutes. We'll get to it when we get to it. Haven't got to it yet. That gets you all up to speed of where we're currently at. So what's next with the pale horse? Of course, even though we have higher priorities, we're still going to be tinkering with the pale horse when we shouldn't be, because race season's coming and we're pretty far from ready for that. What can I say? We're 12 years old. Next step is to go ahead and test the fuel pressure when it's trying to die and at the rail, and make sure it's within parameters, within spec. Assuming that it is, and based upon how it behaves when it's trying to die, it definitely seems more like an ignition issue, specifically ignition timing issue, and that is a component of the TFI. And usually as a TFI starts breaking down due to thermal damage, apparently that is what it's trying to do. It's trying to advance the timing up to 70 degrees, causing it to die and sputter and backfire, as we have noted. The next step is to try and figure out what's going on that caused it to fail emissions testing in the first place, because it's unlikely the back maintenance is going to solve that. It's more likely that that is another issue altogether and something that we're going to have to address. And to be quite frank with you, if the evaporative emission systems on the car were functioning properly, the gas wouldn't have completely evaporated out. And that probably, again, wasn't even what took old pale horse here off the road. That's probably something that's just been occurring over the last, since 2007. There's still some mystery on why it was failing emissions testing. None of the work on this and none of the slurry of chemicals that came with it are indicative of what you would do as if it's an evaporative emissions problem or something else. It's more indicative of a high hydrocarbon, possibly bad catalytic converter, any number of other potential problems that could be occurring with the car that we're going to have to figure out before we get it licensed and on the road. But that's for another video, and we'll see you then. If you like what we're doing here at the Pit Stop Ranch and you want to support us, please hit the like button, and if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button. We would really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot right now. Thank you very much, and have a varnish-tastic day.